Are you an early stage founder revolutionizing the future of retail? Then you're in the right place. My name is Sapna Shah, and I'm an angel investor investing at the pre-seed stage in retail tech, e-commerce, and digitally native brands. I'm also the founder of Retail X Series, an in-real-life event series based in New York to help early-stage founders think through topics like customer acquisition, sales pipelines, branding, financial modeling, fundraising, and more. In this podcast, I interview founders and investors who've spoken at Retail X Series events in the past, and we dig deep into the tactics around key topics that early-stage founders want to hear about. Welcome to the Retail X podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Retail X Series podcast. I'm your host, Sapna Shah. Today's episode is all about getting those early B2B pilots and contracts. Our guest today, Amanda Patterson, CEO of The Call List, will share her perspective on how she closed her early pilots and contracts. Welcome to the podcast, Amanda.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you.
We're excited to have you. So let's start with some background. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your company, what The Call List does?
Sure. So I started my career in PR for Neiman Marcus, which is where I got my passion for retail. But I've spent majority of my career as a management strategy consultant within Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. And during that time, I could live anywhere with an airport. So I chose New Orleans, which is where the idea for The Call List was hatched. And The Call List is interactive video for e-commerce. So with our integration into a brand's website or native app, they can video call their entire audience at once. And we give their brand community access to talk directly with designers or influencers to really impact the evolution of their line and mission while gaining unparalleled insights. And so I tell people to imagine getting a video call like a FaceTime from your favorite influencer or designer or stylist, or an interactive beauty tutorial with a celebrity makeup artist, and you can shop the products as they answer your questions about technique. And that's how our partner MAC Cosmetics leverages The Call List, and I think we're going to probably talk a lot about them today.
That was a great segue. That's exactly what I wanted to start with. So, at the earliest stages of your company, before you actually had a customer, how did you start targeting that customer? And I know Mac is a really big one and different from a lot of other companies who really start with much smaller customers. I think you started kind of big. So tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Oh gosh. Okay. So at our infancy, I talked about The Call List to anyone who would listen. And I had a really different idea of who our customer was based on how I got the idea to start the company. I mentioned that I was living in New Orleans, and a drag queen friend of mine, a neighbor with an international following, would prop his iPhone up on a window ledge and FaceTime call friends and fans for just these little 2-minute performances via FaceTime. And so I might be with finance clients in a steakhouse in Midtown or a grocery store, but I always answered for fear of being kicked off of his list of calls. So I usually handed the phone over to whoever was around, and people were totally engrossed in the interactive performance. And so I thought, wow, I really need to figure out a way for performers or experts with kind of these niche communities to video call multiple people at once, maintain the collective energy of their audience, and charge admission. So initially, I was talking to big theaters and performance organizations or people with a specific expertise and a following, and really was with one of these friends and performers and was eating fried chicken at 1 a.m. With one of their friends who worked for MAC Cosmetics. And he said, hey, this is perfect for beauty tutorials. And the next day he introduced me to his boss, Nicole Falco, who at the time was leading in-store and digital experience. And she became our first customer and collaborator in bringing a more enterprise software to market.
That's sort of an amazing story, which just goes to the power of networks, I think.
Absolutely.
So So you got this intro to Mac, and how did you start out with them? Was it really a pilot? How did you price that? Was it paid, or did you start out for free? Can you tell us a little bit about how that initial piece of it worked?
Sure. Well, we raised a friends and family round, which was certainly not enough to scale to service these kind of large organizations, or even really build the first version of our technology. And so Mac and Estee Lauder paid. And we really brought a collaboration to market with them. So they saw our first stab at a scalable interactive video calling, and they said, hey, we love it and we need it, but we hate sending customers to yet another platform. We want to own these interactions and drive them to e-com. So my co-founder, Doug McKay, a brilliant problem solver and sophisticated technologist, said, hey, no ego, let's shift to plugins and APIs that brands can integrate directly into their sites. And so the first version that Mac used was really an app that we white labeled for them, and since have evolved further. But really, in terms of pricing that first, customer or pilot, it was priced based on what we had to pay the developers to develop it. And now, unfortunately for them, or fortunately for them, as we move forward in that relationship, the pricing is more based on a formula around margins and the level of support we're giving the client, and volume.
So basically, it sounds like they paid for what it costs to actually develop the product for them. But did you sort of add a buffer of, okay, they're going to pay X, but we're not sure that that's enough, and so really we're going to charge them Y?
So now we have a formula related to margin and customization and a level of support for clients, but we do try to fly under the line of needing executive budgetary approval so brands can feel free to give the callist a shot and scale up as they see it working. And that was true even with our first customer, because yes, we found this innovator and this champion who was helping us navigate a large organization and who was sort of shepherding us through that process. But we still needed to support her in a way that made this a viable business decision.
So I have a follow up on that. You want to price your product below sort of this level where it might have to get kicked up to the next level or to CEO level or whatever level that is to get multiple people to sign off on budget. But how did you know what that level was? Not just for Mac, but kind of going forward, how do you figure that out? Because I think that is a really important element of doing sales when you're at a startup, is really understanding who has kind of what check signing authority.
Yeah, I think it comes down to your ability to find someone who is such a believer that they will give you those insights. And that comes sort of down to relationship and, to your point, networking again. And I was really fortunate to find that person pretty early in kind of concept and development, but have continued to create those kind of relationships because it's a two-way street. We want this to be a great business decision, and we really believe, and we know now that this is going to support their goals both from a sales perspective but also from a community development perspective. But at the same time, we need them to feel supported in that, hey, they can make this decision without stirring the much of the pot, and it can scale up if it shows that it works. So having more candid conversations, and I think that's one of the greatest selling mechanisms that I've learned is the hard sell and the forcing something very rarely, if ever, works. But really creating a relationship where you are there to make them look great. So whoever that champion, whoever that buyer is, you're there to help them succeed. And part of that conversation is, where does it make sense and what do they want to spend on this kind of a software.
That's really great advice. And I think that is something that, in my guess is, takes a lot of time to work with kind of these partners at brands or whoever you're selling to. Um, so, which leads me sort of to my next question, which is, how long? So we've talked a lot about Mac, but like, how long overall do you feel like the sales cycle has been for clients of the call list?
Oh gosh. So, we talked about Mac as really, yes, first client, but also a collaborator. And so that was really a 6 to 9 month process because we were developing the tech to match the experience we were designing together. And now it really depends on the size of the brand, which is, going back to my consulting jargon, it depends. But D2C brands with strong influencer marketing strategies, they get it. And they see this as a way to turn their influencers into star sales associates on their site. And so that takes very little time. Because they're agile. But big brands still require more meetings and deeper understanding of integration as well as what it would take from their marketing departments to support these kind of events and make them successful. So not quite the 6 months, but we're not measuring in weeks yet.
That makes a lot of sense. But as you think about sort of these two different kinds of companies that you target, these sort of younger, more nimble brands, and then the more legacy-oriented brands, my guess is that pricing doesn't feel the same for each of them either. Have you tested pricing on both fronts or throughout this process in building your company?
One of the greatest things we have done, and it came by way of a recommendation from a friend who leads sales at Shipmonk, is create a pricing tool or a pricing generator that people can use themselves. So we created a usage related fee and then a support related fee. So if your expectation as a big brand is that we're in your offices and we're really helping you understand how we fit into your overall content strategy or your influencer selling strategy and things of that nature, that there is a support fee associated with that. But if you're a direct to consumer brand and you're doing everything yourself, including, putting the plugin on your site and managing that, then the support fees are at a minimum and you're really just paying for the usage fee.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the idea of creating a pricing tool that is really transparent is always a question I get from entrepreneurs in this space of, should I allow other customers to understand what previous customers or future customers might be paying, or should it be very kind of black box? But it sounds like what you're saying, the transparency is critical for what you're doing.
Well, this is something that has been years long conversation, right? And will continue to be. But I think it helps the relationship to not add an element of negotiation. So if we can be very straightforward and hey, this is software, right? So this is not intangible time and energy. This is very straightforward. You are paying based on your usage and everyone is paying the same. And if you're a big brand and you can afford 1 million people on your events, then have at it. And if you're a small brand and you are trying to convert, 1,000 or 100 customers per these influencer events, then that can be very affordable for you, and you can see a big return on investment.
Besides the fact that you've got sort of these smaller, more nimble customers and these more legacy customers who have very different sales cycles, have there been other barriers in the sales process on either end of those or on either type of company as you continue to grow the business?
Oh, sure. I mean, plenty. I'm rejected every single day. But I think, it comes down to that $1 million question of finding the right decision maker. So now we're seeing the content strategy leads under the same umbrella of digital marketing and e-com working closely together. So often both are in the room and excited about bringing their worlds together. And that is a shift over the course of just the last few years. So I think timing is everything, and you could have the best product in the world, but if the market isn't ready for it, then they're not going to be set up from a sort of structure standpoint to support it. And the conversations we're having now versus at our conception basically are much different because the need is so obvious. And that's kind of, I guess I would say more generically, think about whose problem you're solving and go talk to them. And if they're not the decision maker, then they'll send you to the decision maker because they need you in their lives.
That's great advice. Something you just said though, kind of struck me that you mentioned timing is everything. And one of the things that I think your company, your software in your product helps brands do is create communities amongst their customers, not just to enable shopping, but to also, kind of create that emotional connection and potentially kind of get a community of customers or interested audience together. Has that sort of trend, and we've been hearing a lot about it in the press and different kinds of companies that are out there creating communities, has that helped in your sales process, kind of seeing that shift across all of these industries?
Absolutely. I think, we're seeing a backlash to static content, and there's no question that video is a necessity and static video is basically ineffective at this point. So both millennials and then certainly Gen Z consumers and beyond really are demanding to be part of a brand's narrative, to be part of a community, and to share experiences. And so I think that can be a very scary thing for big legacy brands, especially. I mean, direct to consumer brands are all about, they were born in communities, right? They were born on social media. And so they really rely on their community to share out what is happening and how they're evolving and to affect that. But bigger brands are very timid about meeting their community and their customers face to face because they've had the veil of the brand for so long. And so what we do, and I think based on my experience as a consultant and then my co-founder's experience with large and small organizations as well, he was instrumental for the sale of his first company to a Fortune 100 company. I think we understand, okay, we need to navigate that sort of corporate aspect as well as help them give an experience that really resonates and is meaningful to their communities, which is a necessity at this point. So I think, we offer that comfort, whereas teams with less corporate experience might not be able to share kind of some of the challenges or understand some of the challenges or get more frustrated by them than we do.
That's great. Cycling back a little bit, back to kind of building the sales pipeline. Have you tried kind of growth hacking, press, kind of a paid marketing, kind of in the way that D2C brands might do customer acquisition? Or have you really focused on sort of more of a traditional sales pipeline process in getting kind of clients after your first big one?
So we've been fortunate to get some organic recognition in Forbes and WWD and a few others, but we have not invested yet in marketing. And that is something that we're looking at for mid 2020. And I think we have a much better handle on our value prop now and how to communicate it, which is why we'll go forward with that investment. Whereas before, we were really just looking for the first dominoes to fall and to look to our customers, our first big customers, to help direct us in our early evolution. But in terms of growth hacking, what I would say is certainly we've been a part of a few programs and they have helped us accelerate some of our introductions, and we have found champions. And I think one of the greatest assets we have in sales is one of our board members, Maggie Chiafordini, who was previously the CEO of YSL Beauty and has helped bring products, both tech and non-tech, to market. And she just got it and is enthusiastic about what the call list can do to change the shape of e-commerce, and her experience in knowing who the right person to talk to in target organizations and speaking to them from a fellow executive's perspective has been incredibly valuable. So in that way, I guess, to your earlier question, yeah, we're kind of old school in leveraging our network and having conversations and building relationships for sales, and haven't found a growth hack that has been very beneficial to us.
That's great. That's really helpful feedback. Everything that you say keeps coming back to sort of the network and the champions, which I think is really interesting. That there's been a real theme in kind of the way you've approached sales for the call list kind of since the beginning. So tell me a little bit more about kind of this, the more old school kind of sales process. When did you hire your first salesperson? Are you still, as the CEO, still involved in sales? What lessons have you learned? I think this is one of the hardest things for startups to do, is to hire sales people and create a sales pipeline and a process, and understand where the CEO or the co-founder should continue to play and where they shouldn't. So if you can give some color around all of those kind of elements that you've gone through, I think that would be really helpful to our listening audience.
Oh gosh, you're bringing up some painful memories. Well, this is an area we've experienced some growing pains, and I think the biggest takeaway so far is that a buyer in the space doesn't always make a great seller. And I think, kind of some of where I've stumbled in my approach and through network and champions and such, is that the people who have been enthusiastic and want to get involved, very early on, that's who we looked to start with sales. And I think when you are in a position of power as a buyer for so long, that sometimes you shy away from the vulnerability aspects of selling. And so those who we brought on initially to be sales maybe hadn't been in a selling position in the past, but they had spent sometimes decades in the position of buying software like ours and creating these experiences within large organizations, but they couldn't get over the angst of what it means to sell. So this is an area we're still trying to figure out, and I am still deeply involved in sales at the enterprise level or the large organization level. But I'll check back in and let you know if we find a hack for this, because I am actively looking for one.
Yeah, this feels like the toughest kind of piece of this is really building that early sales pipeline support. And a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked to who have been working on this, really, the CEO or co-founder is still really involved years and years in, many, many clients in. Yeah. So if I hear any news on growth or great hacks for this, I will certainly let everyone know. But thank you for sharing kind of your experience.
It's a big focus for us this year, is building out that part of our team. So now that we are really sound with our foundational product and with our tech side of the house, I think this year is going to be a big focus on building a team around business development and customer support.
So right now, though, before you've got that team, how are you managing the sales pipeline, especially at the enterprise level where you're very involved?
Well, I've tried a few tools, and I just started using Copper at the recommendation of a founder friend of mine from New York Fashion Tech Lab. And I'm still adjusting, but I like it. So far, so good. I would definitely recommend people checking out that tool because it's impossible to keep it organized without a tool at this point.
That's great advice. And in the show notes for this podcast, we will have a link proper for anyone who is interested. So I want to wrap up with one last question, which is what's sort of the one resource or the one piece of advice or the one thing that you would want founders who are listening to this podcast to take away to help them kind of make that first sale, that get that first pilot or that first contract?
Oh, well, I think that this is going to be an obvious one based on our conversation, but find great mentors. So, being a part of incubators and accelerators with dedicated mentors who want you to succeed and will give you candid feedback are the absolute best resource. And our first was Monarch, which is where I met you.
Yes.
And yeah. And more recently, New York Fashion Tech Lab, which was incredible, as well as Verizon Media Lab in collaboration with Havas, which is kicking off this month for us. And I really believe that people who have experience in different aspects of the business you're trying to build or who you're trying to sell to, who are going to be very direct with you and help you overcome some challenges that you might not have the experience to overcome yourself, it will be, just critical in navigating that. And then also don't hold too tight to that first vision. Let it evolve to something that customers want.
I think both of those are great pieces of advice. And to your point, you and I would not be talking here if you hadn't been the Monarch program. So
That's right.
there's more than just sales mentorship that comes out of these programs. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your stories and experience and being so candid about the positives and some of the negatives in building your sales process and getting to those kind of early customers for the call list. I really appreciate your coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk to you again.
Great. And to our audience, thank you for listening to the Retail X podcast. We'll have another episode out shortly. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to attend a Retail X Series event in person, check out www.retailxseries.com for upcoming events in New York. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Retail X Series. You can also learn more about me, find fundraising resources, or submit a pitch deck at www.redgiraffeadvisors.com. Thanks, and catch you next time.